But in terms of the policy, I think both of the, kind of get at both questions at the same time. It's a question of education policy, obviously. You want to encourage the quantity of education, but you also want to skew the types or change the types of education we're providing to young ages so that they have the kinds of skills that are not easily replaced by computers. So even beyond trying to encourage everyone in the United States to get at least a high school education, it would be useful for that high school education to change perhaps from the kind of skills they've been teaching for the last 50 years towards modern economy skills, and maybe more of an emphasis on vocational education. You know, plumbing, electricity, things like that, that, like I said, those can't be easily replaced. Service jobs can't be easily replaced by computers.
So when you were looking at productivity growth over the last couple of years, it seemed like you sort of concluded, well, it must have gone up because we cut labor more than production, as opposed to saying, here are the factors that led to it. So we have, and we have some pretty good, it takes time to do that research, so I'm not pointing fingers or anything, but we have a pretty good indication that Walmart was a big part of the productivity growth in the mid-90s. And we don't have that yet for the most recent period, except for a couple of, I thought it was pretty interesting, the capital side of it, that one hypothesis would be a bunch of inefficient capital just got shut down. And perhaps a bunch of workers who were on board who really weren't doing things that were all that productive in terms of the core mission of the organization got let go. I just want to float that, trying to think that through to get at what's going on here. And I talked with Bart during the break also about some cyclical and industrial factors. So we had this big burst of productivity in the 90s that was part Walmart, but that was partly, we had kind of a retail bubble going there. So now that may have at least run its course for a while until we get our debt paid down and we can start buying like crazy again. Maybe, what kind of role do those kind of cyclical factors have in the ups and downs?
We at the Fed, we have a board of directors. So we talk to our directors, who are bankers and business people, and they refer, the new hot term is the new normal. And a lot of them talk about how they now have, the recession sort of gave them a chance to breathe, in a sense, and say, okay, now we need to make cuts. We need to just slash the workforce. And now that we've gotten down to this core workforce, how do we use the IT and the equipment and the things that all the investments that they had done during the boom, but were too frenzied to be able to slow down and say, how do we use this to improve our productivity? Now we have a chance where demand is down, and we've got time to kind of think about the organization. So, there's research on the cleansing effect of recessions, and I think perhaps what's happened in this recession is a good example of that kind of cleansing effect of needing to reorganize while you have basically the opportunity cost of your time is low, of time management, and so they can devote time to thinking about that issue. That may be what's going on. So it may be that that these are that to me suggests it's relatively sustainable. They've found permanently better ways of organizing their businesses as opposed to some short-run issue that just has to do with kind of measurement error and inertia. But, it's a huge open question. Who knows?
I mean, one way is to connect it with Theo's distinction between IT production, IT use, and other industries. And one way to argue is that IT production may have a bit of an issue because this semiconductor cycle seems to be slowing somewhat. At least that's what some people are arguing. Jorgensen, for example, has been arguing that point for a while. But that may be, a temporary problem, and we want to get over that and get into a sort of new innovation phase. So the production side of innovation may not have the problem. The use side gets to a lot of the points that you were making. It was retail and finance and, what's the next industry that really can use technology in a way that it's going to create jobs rather than only destroy jobs. And then there's the other part, which, is not really using IT a lot. A big part of that, by the way, is construction, which, is getting smaller and actually therefore will have a positive impact on productivity because there has been slowing productivity or actually negative productivity for a long time. So to some extent, a lot is going to depend on that sort of part of the economy that is using IT. What do you think that we can get back to an upward trend in innovation that's going to drive productivity and create jobs in the longer term, which is really sort of, trying to get away from the bad and the ugly?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a major debate, is the role of IT per se in the overall productivity growth. HP announced, I think, yesterday or the day before, they have some major innovation that they think will allow, the trend in the kind of Moore's Law trend to accelerate. So, I myself, I tend to think that there's long lags from the IT production side to the productivity gains from the IT investment, and especially from the IT innovations themselves. And so what we're seeing now in the current recession over the last 2 years, perhaps, is productivity gains from IT investments made many years before, and IT that was invented many years before that. So it's really hard to sort of say, was there a technology shock that happened over the last 2 years that created this productivity boom? Probably not. I think it's probably more about the IT using industries and examples of retail and service industries using their the IT that they previously bought. And maybe it's spreading now. It had been IT, it had been finance, it had been other industries, and now maybe there's new industries that are starting to finally, get the bang for the buck from their IT.
I don't know if the data is good enough. Could you take a look, right, at the kinds of work that got sent out of businesses, and when it returns, would it be that same kind of work focused not on immediate product development, product return, but more the next generation of activities? Because to me, I mean, it's clear that that will happen. Right, in the aerospace business, there's no question. All of us know there's certain product lines that we need to deal with in the next 10 years. The question is, when is the market going to be right in terms of not just our ability to get cash to go do this, but the ability for our customers to buy that next generation product, right, and the replacement cycles. So my guess is there's got to be some kind of a play in there also, which obviously would spike productivity, right, because you're not cutting anything that's producing the actual output at this point.
Good point. That's a very good point. I mean, it could be that there are economic theories exactly making that point, that during recessions, perhaps, and maybe in this recession in particular, time devoted to innovation for the next generation of products gets cut. And so what's happening now, perhaps, is just an emphasis on current production. And so, this productivity growth we see now, that suggests it's short run, that there's going to be some pain down the road, some payback coming from having ignored the investments in intangible capital. So, yeah, I think that's something that's going to be studied very closely in the next few years. And I think there is data on research and development, obviously, and process versus product innovations and things like that. And I think a lot of researchers are going to be looking at that.